could not do one, but yeah, plan is to have this continuous session throughout the year. So starting with this particular chapter with one of key topic on UiPath Cloud. We have a couple of more things, not only to discuss on cloud, but the agenda looks like we discuss about cloud administrator. This is a different all topic. So we'll go to administrator, cloud admin. What are the things? What key takeaways? If you are working on-premise today, so there will be a little bit more difference in a cloud admin plus orchestrator. We'll also see certain differences between both, and we'll also focus a little bit more on modern folder, because that's with your current setup you may be working with classic folder, but with modern folder there is a difference in the approach. We'll little discuss how do you set up, what are the things to be taken into account. Another topic is on automation ops. So there could be other different topic, but the primary agenda is to go through admin setup and automation ops. So with the end of this session, the objective is you all are aware how to set up your cloud admin, how to set up your tenants, plus bringing the right governance to manage things in the right way. So there would be various personas coming into your cloud orchestrator. So we'll see those, how we will define with some sessions other like live lab sessions. So during the session, if you have any question, feel free to unmute. We can definitely make it interactive and put your questions in the chat window. Otherwise, we can take towards the last. Okay. All right. So starting with the cloud, what is this UiPath Cloud? Is it same as Orchestrator? So not to confuse on those. Orchestrator is a different component which manage our robots and processes and all triggers, all different setup. But when it comes for cloud alone, so it is the primary component which is helping us. This is the SaaS product at the end from UiPath. SaaS is nothing but software as service, which is a cloud-based environment, but it helps us to manage and create all our environments like the tenants, right? So we have organization-specific licenses. If you are going with a community, by default, you're getting two and a limited number of licenses. But when it is enterprise license, you will be assigned with some enterprise license key, right? So those will be managed from cloud admin. If you compare this with what could be the comparison with the on-premise, it could be a host tenant, right? Within your host tenant, you are having various tenant created, and you manage your license and all. But similarly, within your cloud, you don't get a host tenant, but the cloud admin is the setup where we have the license management. We can create multiple tenants, and within tenants, we can manage our services as well. So what is those services? For example, let's say in a tenant, you want to give insights access for task mining access, or maybe you want to give, let's say, AI center access. So these are all services, right? So you can enable this service for a given tenant from this cloud admin account. So before even adding any user to a particular tenant you create, those also needs to be invited to the cloud portal. So that's where you will have users. And one great feature it provides at the end is creating groups, right? So there would be scenarios you will group your users. For example, you want to group all your citizen developers into one group so that you can manage their access, manage their policies centrally. So you'll create a group in the cloud and then add users to that group. Same way, you can create some policies as well to apply some group. For example, suppose you want all the developers to follow certain coding best practices. So you can create a group and create some policies and apply the policy to that group. So by default, it is applicable to all the user part of that group, right? So that the benefits it brings, and it is centrally managed. So you don't need to do this setups at a tenant level. You can do it at the entire cloud login, cloud admin, and it will be inheriting to all different tenants. So what key benefits is really bringing to our table? There are a couple of benefits. First is if you use through cloud instead of on-premise, basically it's easy to set up. You don't need to do any manual installation. If any of you are working with infrastructure with cloud installations, orchestrated installation, we need to take that server components, install all these services, Redis and all different services, do all the MS installation. But here it is, you don't need to do anything. It's a SaaS. It's readily available with all required infrastructure. You just need to bring your license key with working with the right UiPath customer support manager who is assigned to you. Your license is ready. You need to give the support ID. Once the account is up and running, your license are configured, you are ready to go. You just need to create various tenants based on your organized structure, and it's you can create all dev, ITG, different best practices you can follow and start create. So yeah, so costing part here we definitely know we don't have this server managed environment. We don't need to create different servers. Here it is completely with your control with the SaaS, right? It's just creating on UI rather taking that burden on creating different servers to have your log saved or all the services. If you worked with on-premise earlier, what happened in our case with HP, we used to have this on-premise setup for more than 4 5 years now. Still, we migrated recently to cloud, so it's completely a shift. So we don't need to take worry about how the servers are performing, but it's completely on SaaS. So it created a collaboration platform at the end. And one of the benefit I also see is all product components at one place, right? So you have access to Automation Hub from cloud. You have access to all orchestrated services from cloud, including AI Center, task mining, all different products at one place. That is a biggest advantage, which definitely is coming with automation suites as well, which is your on-premise setup. But here it is giving you that flavor of one place store for everything. License activation, support usage through your support ID. You can get the license activation centrally for one place. Like all the tenants you create, you can give license to the tenant, manage how many licenses to be configured for which tenant. You have a dashboard view as well, saying how many licenses are allocated to you, how many are utilized by which tenant, and how much, right? It's easy to scale as well, easy to manage in terms of, for example, you want to create n number of tenants configuration. I'll tell you one of the setup. For example, you are part of a central COE and you want to create your tenant structure. You can take all different functions because of segregation of duty, right? So SOD conflicts should not happen. So you can create different tenants, let's say CS, customer support, commercial organization, finance, HR department. So you can create various tenants prefixed with some ITG and development and production. So all are easily available to access. One other thing also you can do is given some color coding. I'll show you one small demo also while creating this. You can give some color codings. Easily it can be distinguished. So which environment you may be logged into, right? It could be a development environment, it could be ITG environment or production environment. So yeah, so these are all certain key functionality available as key benefit for a cloud usage. How it really looks like, right? So very simple interface, and don't confuse this with the orchestrator. Orchestrator is different and cloud admin is different. Although we access from same URL, but we go to a different services. All right. So orchestrator is one tenant you create and you start using that. All right. You can start using this and then it will be available for you. But first step is once you start login and set up your account, first is to set it on this thing on the cloud administrator portal. So this is how it looks like. You have this simple interface of home, admin, and all different services appear based on which of the tenant you created, like connected to. And you have some functionality also like multi-language. Suppose your customers are support part of different language, you can always change that. It also provide change the color theme as well. Updated versions provide this feature, and it's one place store. Okay. And one other thing is, suppose you may be working with sharing the software to your citizen developers or different users. So there's sometimes we struggle. Okay, where is the downloadable links, right? So downloadable links are always available to your admin center. You can go to resources under help. Here you can always find what is the stable version released for enterprise, what is the stable version released for community. We do have the link for older versions. So if you click on this older version for enterprise, you can see all different versions and you can share these links to users. Just again, one place store for you, and it has different options to download other softwares as well. For example, you may be working with Citrix and all runtime and all. You can always find the details here. So this is one other benefit. And remember, this particular page is accessible to all the users, right? So all different users can access whoever access to your cloud invited, irrespective of their access type, they can go to this help section and take advantage of this readily available components. So how it is different from on-premise? Certain key, it's not a huge difference when it comes for UiPath Cloud versus Orchestrator. There will be some minor difference in terms of API based. Suppose you're using API today in Orchestrator on-premise, you have a availability of basic authentication, right? You can create user accounts, user ID and password, and using those basic auth, you can connect to API endpoints. But on cloud, it is token-based authentication. And one other benefit on premise is definitely you can publish your library to a host because there is a host tenant and all tenants are created under host. So it will be inheriting that. But on cloud, there is no host tenant concept. So if any library, you have to publish those at a tenant level, right? If you created this library tenant, it will be available to all tenants, say all different folders and all. But for suppose you have 5 different tenants, you have to upload this library to 5 different tenants. And password complexity, if you are already on Active Directory authentication SSO, that's not a challenge. But if you're a custom account, you have this policy configuration on premise, but that might be a tricky part on cloud. But cloud does support on single sign-on, Active Directory authentication, Microsoft authentication. So those are the scaled approach. One of the approach what we are using is SAML based authentication, right? So with SAML SSO, it's pretty simple. So you can bring your organization SAML configuration. Today that supports through Active Directory and SAML supports through cloud. So you can configure your the ping ID or any other MFA into cloud and they start authenticating to your user. So that's the difference. And there's a detailed link as well, which explain how it compares with when it comes for automation suites. I'll just bring very quickly this view. Let me just take this here. So this is a very important link where suppose you are working on a scenario where it could be various capability you are looking for, right? This particular table is explain what other capability like high level resource isolation, multiple tenants in your organization. So there are 3 options available for you, right? One is standalone, automation suites, or automation cloud. And you can see this which is more recommended and the expectations. So standalone is nothing but you install one server with on-premise. Automation suites bring the capability similar to cloud. So that's why you see these are almost same for both all. And some of the areas even cloud may be having some challenge where federated host administration, basic authentication for external apps. So there it is with automation suites. But yeah, you can see this table as a very detailed table, given a comparison based on your business case, which types of automation or which type of selection you should do. All right. So before I go to Cloud Orchestrator, I'd like to show you some demo, right? How this is configured, how you can access and all. So let me, yeah. So in order to access a cloud account, you can go to cloud.uipath.com. If you are doing this for the first time, you can also do a sign up. So if you do the sign up with your account, it will help you to create a community license and community orchestrator account for you with some default license as well. So you can always play and learn with this. So I already have accounts. I'll continue with my Microsoft authentication. So suppose your account is attached to multiple orchestrator tenant, it will show on the screen to choose which one. I have few with my organization. I'll go to my MVP tenant. All right. So if you see, this is the main. It is not orchestrator. I said this is our cloud admin portal where I have various left tab. You see the various services are coming. And this is the areas where it just introduced the part. Here are some services like downloadable links. Maybe if you log in for the first time, you may not see this service at the left side. It may be different for you. But why is that so? It's all coming from this tenant selection. On the top right corner, if you see there is a tenant with test, if I now change this tenant to development, this will reduce my services. See, this tenant has less services, right? So this is how it works, but the primary work happened within the admin, particularly on the admin section, right? So if you go to this admin, so you see these are the tenant page, right? Here we can create tenants. So any tenant you want to create, click on this add tenant and give a name, meaningful name. Let's say I will create a tenant for finance and give a name as production. And here I was telling you can define a color code as well, right? Suppose this is a production tenant and you give a color coding. This color coding may not appear on this screen, but when you log in inside the orchestrator, there will be a red tab on top. So once you create this color segregation, so suppose by mistake, maybe you connected to a production, maybe you are doing some activity. So at least that color will indicate you are on a production channel, right? So it's a good best practice. You can take advantage to segregate your tenants based on some colors. So development one, you can take it different color, production one doing different color like that. Or you can define based on function type as well. It's up to your organization setup, but this is one of the tips. And select where your region to be selected. Maybe there are certain GDPR policies, then you can always select based on organization guidelines. And here is the services, right? So these are all services which based on your license availability, you can take advantage to, right? So by default, orchestrator actions and process are kind of mandatory, right? So orchestrator must have this process and action, but you see the other services, which is kind of add-on. Let's say insights, which is bringing us that insights dashboard, integration services. So this basically you're connecting to various application through your existing connections, data service, AI center, DU, task mining, and all. So based on your selection type, it will start reflecting on the left hand pad. Let me just go ahead and don't select anything except the orchestrated action process. So once this is done, so it will show you in this list your tenants which are configured, what services are enabled, and this is how it reflects. Now, in order to give a license and manage the license, you can always go inside, click on that license and see how many attended. This is based on my dummy account, what license I have, attended, named user, developers, attended users, and robot services, right? You can edit this as well. So you click on this particular tab, it will give you this option to edit what number of license to allocate. So I already used this, so it's showing 0. If there is any license available, it will show in this list how many are available, and you can give that license number here, right? Now, let me just see, this is still showing me because I'm into development. If I switch to product finance prod, you see the red tab appear on the top. It's indicating I'm connected to a production tenant. That's one. And you see the left side panel now, it doesn't have any other services like insights, automation hub, and all these details because I'm not enable that. Assume your business come back to you and say, no, this tenant needs to be configured with further services. You can go to this tenant setting. Let's say we activate other things now. So if automation hub is enabled, then only store can be enabled. So that's why this was disabled at that time. Now just refresh. See, all services have appeared on this. And remember, the services are attached to a tenant. So if your tenant is by default, it's a isolated environment. So if you're doing something on the finance, like in this setup, if I'm doing something on the finance prod, not necessarily the data will move to test environment. So that's a different one. So it's isolated environment. So like in order to maintain your SOD, you can create your tenants and give respective services and their access to respective team members. They will be able to work on these areas in an isolated environment, right? So that you maintain the clear segregation of duty. Okay. And it's a same interface to manage your license and all. So you do that with the tenants. Second, it comes for accounts and group. Before even any user added to a respective orchestrator tenant, they must be invited to this group, right? This user group. So one of the best practice I'll suggest is you can create groups. So this particular orchestrator group supports adding multiple users. You can create. Let's say I'm creating a development group, right? So let's say I have multiple developers. I can create a development group, and here I can give all the user IDs as soon as the users are available. And within Orchestrator, if we go back to Orchestrator, let me show you one of the scenario. We added a group now. If I go to Orchestrator, so I just click on Orchestrator, it will take me to Orchestrator. So if you see the URL, this is my organization name. The next part is the tenant what we created, and the next part is the service where I'm connected to, the Orchestrator service, right? So here, suppose I want to give access to someone, right? So I can go to tenant, manage access, and suppose I select here, add role, add permissions. So here it is asking me whether to giving a role to user, robot account, and group. So if I select group here, now let's say we select development. See, development appeared on the screen, right? Here I can give, let's say, tenant administrator. We can select any right role, but I'm just selecting for demo purpose. And whichever the license you want to give, let's say, attended license, developer automation developer license, and assign. Now, once this is done, you don't need to add individual users to the orchestrator anymore, right? Suppose tomorrow I got some developer to be added, so I can just go to this accounts and groups, select my development tenant, sorry, a group, and here I just need to provide the email address. See, it appears this list, and you just click and save. There is one part what we are doing private preview now with the UiPath product image and SAML integration. AD integration is already available. You can bring your authentication setting with AD. There is these are all different configuration available. There is another one is with SAML. Once it is available, you can bring your organization settings. Which tenant, for example, Azure AD you have, you can bring your organization Azure AD to here and save this. So once this is done, your group addition is much easier as well. Because if you provide your email address, it will read the details, bring directly there. So user may not be invited. Assume a scenario here, you are adding, like you don't have any authentication group configured, like SAML or any other things. You have to invite the user first. Once the invitation is done, then only they can be actively available to the group. Otherwise, that will not work. So, but the best practice at a scaled usage is you first configure with your one of the service provider, like Azure AD is very common, and SAML, like Ping ID and other if you are using, those will bring you right benefit, because that time you don't need to invite the user anymore. In this step, you have to invite the user and then you add the group. But other step is you add the email ID directly to the group, and as soon as they log into the portal, you just need to share the URL to them. The authentication will happen through those authentication provider, and it will based on the group setting, the license, the all the access you have provision, it will inherit. That's a very important point to note. Okay. So this is how you can manage your groups. If you don't have any MFA or any authentication provider, just invite the user. The users will receive an invitation link. They need to accept the cloud invite. First, you have to give user email ID here, send the invitation. And you can also, during this invitation only, can select which group he belongs to. So you don't need to redo that activity. After activation, you have to reapply. But just invite and send the invitation. The user will receive invitation, and once they configured and accept the invite, they're configured here. That's the simplest approach, even if you don't have any authentication provider. If you have, yeah, the settings are pretty much, you have to do all these settings in respective from respective authentication provider and do this. Okay, so always remember a best practice, like do by group methods only. Do not allocate individual user into respective orchestrator, right? Because if it is a citizen developer, your number of citizen developer will increase, and it's easy to manage the policies as well, right? If it is group, then we can go to automation ops. We add them into the respective policy to the group, so we don't need to apply policy person for person X, person Y. It's based on groups you are applying policies, and this policy will maintain some coding standard at the end. Okay. Moving on to a few more benefits with cloud admin. Okay, it's like somebody remember. All right. So if you're doing some API authentication, that's where external app come into picture. So you have to register the application URL. Suppose in future there is a feature coming in with UiPath 22.4. That's a Teams integration, right? So you have to integrate cloud, how it is working to Teams, so to start jobs and all. So you have to do a application registration here. Those application property you have to define within Teams. That's a complex feature I'm just explaining, so that Teams can integrate and interact with your Cloud Orchestrator. Assume you are creating some custom APIs outside of this, then you have to create this application, give a scope. This application is applicable to what orchestrator resource. Let's say you want to do orchestrator API, then what different features you want to give. Let's say a user interaction, or maybe let's say asset, you want to allow asset addition. So all these features, once you select the scope, you define this application authentication type, like confidential, non-confidential application. Once it is done, you will be able to do all this API interaction easily to this cloud. It will give you a token once this registration is done. Here I can see how many licenses are allocated available to me, what different dummy license, like how many licenses are there, or how many are consumed. The easy way to understand, if you see this is completely blue, means it's completely allocated, right? So if you see this is a 2 of 2, it's already consumed, right? 2 licenses are available, like given to me, and 2 are I consumed it. If I go to other ones, for example, this one, it says automation hub, 3 of 5, right? So out of 5, 3 are consumed and 2 are available. Like this, you have to take that through. And we do have audit log at admin level saying whatever the activity being done at administrator, you will be able to see that. Like if you see, I just perform this group creation. So this got created. Who created what time? So you have audit trail for this, which is important if you have multiple administrator doing the work, right? And you can always change this properties. Like suppose you want to change your organization name tomorrow, so you can change it here. This does allow you to change the URL. But the only caveat is if your robots are connected to cloud, then changing the URL means you have to update your cloud as well, right? You have to, like the robots as well. The robot will disconnect, you have to update the URLs. So changing the URL is not a recommended practice if you are already using it. But if you're starting it, make sure you change this as per your appropriate name and start giving the proper name. And the support ID is very important parameter. Suppose you want to do some issue logging and ticket log, interact with UiPath. So they'll ask only one thing, support ID, right? So you have to provide the support ID. Based on that, they'll be able to troubleshoot and provide all issue resolutions. You can also bring some additional logo to the top to bring your own branding of your organization. So once you load the logo, it will appear on top. So that's another feature that's available through admin. All right, so that's all a summary about how admin is available. Let me now move on to our next section is Cloud Orchestrator. So far what we learned is how to create uh, tenants and how to give different services to a tenant and how to provision license. The actual work happened within Orchestrator. Those who are new here, I assume all of you must be aware of Orchestrator, but just as a brief about Orchestrator, this is the central unit which manages the entire robotic process, right? The entire RPA ecosystem being governed through Orchestrator. So if you have robots, packages, developers developing the automations, assistant executing the automations, or your assets where configurations are saved, you're managing jobs centrally to define which jobs should start, sharing the automation with different users. So all this happens at one place. That's the orchestrator. This is a web application, offers the facilities where you can bring all users, the robots, and process package together, right? And here within this is also an isolated area in that way, saying where all the services, what could be, let's say, robot, process, assets, configuration can be at one place. Orchestrator are basically managing two type of robots at the end, right? So one is what you're producing from development, attended, where your orchestrator is helping to share all these automations with various attended users. Centrally, you publish the process, and it is available to users through attended bots. If it is unattended, along with managing this process and package, it also takes care about schedulers, like you can schedule which bots to start at what time and it will trigger. Within Orchestrator, like if you see the structure within Orchestrator, like we have cloud, from the admin account, we create a tenant, and within tenant, you will be creating multiple folders. Let's take an example of a finance, right? Finance as a organization, let's say it is within your company, finance is a department, and finance may have some various sub departments as well, like accounts payable, accounts receivable, uh, accounts payable, non-inventory. So all different departments will be part of that. So now every sub departments also managing their own data, right? They will not be sharing those with others. They want to manage it within themselves, and you have to also maintain some segregation of duty there. And but at the end, they are all part of finance, so that when it comes for supply chain or customer support, they should not have access to finance data. So how do you do this segregation? Is within Orchestrator, now you have to create subfolders, but you should not create multiple Orchestrator here, but subfolders. So Orchestrator provide you this feature where you can create folders and bring your users into respective folder, so that whoever the user having access to a folder, they will be able to see those data of that folder only. But yes, there are some access, like some components retained at tenant level, which will be available to all. Some component retained at folder level that will be only available to folders. Very classic example, some scenario is, let's say robot is at robot process, job, assets, queue, and triggers. These all is execution of transactional level details. Those goes to folder. Maybe the users access the roles. These are tenant level details that goes to a tenant. That's just an example. We have few more as well. So when it comes for cloud, one of other best practice also attached when it comes for robot process and orchestrator. If you're in cloud, the recommended versions to maintain is third latest robot versions should be there in your setup, right? If you see, this is just a diagrammatic view as a heat map. We are in 21.10 LTS today. Yes, 22 is under community, but at least you will see from a enterprise release, 21.10 last LTS. So the last three versions are kind of supported version, right? So third latest version. If you go beyond that, then it is you will lose the support scope. You may not be able to get the right scope, so it's not like it's recommended to have upgraded version there. Now, earlier there was a challenge when it comes for upgrading. We used to do it manually, but if you started exploring 21.10, this is now a little bit more simpler. So if you're in cloud and you are using this 21.10, you can define policies saying its robot needs to be upgraded to this version next time when a new version release. So the upgrade happens automatically. So you don't need to manually do the upgrade, and you can always define. It's not like you don't have a control. You can define those policies saying when what version can go. Like when define, okay, this is the version we approve, so all the robot can upgrade to that version. So there's some additional flexibility. The manual work of the upgrade is gone. We can do this upgrade remotely as well with this particular capability. Now a bit about modern folder. So within Orchestrator, once you create a this folder is segregation. Maybe I'll just switch my view page so that you can easily see that. If we are inside Orchestrator, like we're discussing Orchestrator. So within Orchestrator, if you see, these are all tenant level details. This is all the left hand side is the folder level. So some tenant level details are machine, package, audit, and all. If I go to a folder, I will be able to see automations, monitoring, queues, assets, and all. Automation is nothing but it's a process, job, trigger, and logs. So the transactional details are wrapped inside a folder, but other primary details goes to tenant. So whenever you are working on some package and all, you can upload here, see the audit trail here and all. So if you are, for example, here in finance, if I want to create a clear segregation structure, what I will do is I'll create a folder here. Say, let's say I will just name accounts payable as AP. And I can also define here the package feed is coming from tenant, or I want a separate package feed at folder level. Let's do for demo purpose, I'll go for folder level package structure. Okay, so this is one which is clearly says a folder level package. That means your package will be uploaded to this particular folder itself, right? You can do that now within automations. You can upload your package. See, this tab is enabled. Inside, I don't have this tab because there is no folder level package there. So you want to keep your package within that particular folder. You can also enable that. And same way I can create here. Yeah. So here I selected tenant level package, so that option will not be there. It will inherit the package from tenant itself. Whatever the package will upload to tenant will go there. Okay, so let's go for this too. Now these are all I'm creating as a modern folder, right? It is not a classic folder. Classic folder would have given me an option here as a classic. That's by default is disabled in your orchestrator. So if that's because it's already deprecated, right? So that's where UiPath is by default disabled, but you can enable classic folder from settings tab, which is designated as deprecated. So it's not there, but you can always enable classic folder. If at all you need to have that option, you are not ready for modern folder usage, you can enable that. Then you can create a classic folder. See, it's now showing me classic folder. Just very quickly for those who are new, classic folder is the same as the folder. It's bringing the similar capability, but a very legacy approach where you can create machines. You take the machine key and add the machine key to the user and give the permission and create an environment, add robots into environment and create process. That's how it generally creates. But in modern folder, you don't see environment at all, right? If I go to the here, you will not have environments. So it is a modern approach. What happens is inside this process, like folder, you can create multiple processes. Like you can create processes, triggers, and all. That all concept remains same. But the challenge is how do you give access to a robot or machine? Then you have to give permission here. Go to settings tab, assign a group or a user to this particular section, right? We have a development group. So if I give permissions to development group to this, that means the process created here, whatever the role I suppose I will give them automation user role, they will be able to run the bots. Now this user will be able to come here and start bot, and they have access to all the automations created. That's how it is. So you don't need to create machine like the keys and mapping over environment and blueprint to process. But here it is simplest in terms of once the package is loaded, you come here and select your package, create the process, and as soon as it is deployed, all users having this access have access to the robots, right? So access to the process you created. This is how you have to manage the model folder. One of the benefit of model folder is you can also create subfolders, right? You can add a subfolder. For example, within AP, accounts payable, assume a scenario, I have 3 different region team working. Let's say APJ, Asia Pacific, Japan, or it could be Americas, right? Or it could be worldwide as well, right? So I can create this. This may not be ideal scenario in your business, but I'm just giving an example. Let's say you have this type of structure where you still need to create subfolder. Again, it will go to the subfolder level structure. Here, if you see, if I go to my subfolder, the process package and all is grouped under this. Now, here it's interesting to know which access you are managing at what layer. The user what at AMS will be able to see only AMS. User at AB, they can see all this, and user at subfolder can see that. So in that way, you can bring your right structure, but that's not possible through classic folder. So modern folder supports you creating this modern folder with a different subfolder, giving access restriction, and bringing things together. So some way you may be thinking this, okay, as an environment you created, like earlier we're creating environment, here we can create subfolder, but it will not be a best practice if you just replace environment with subfolder if you are at a scale. I have seen scenarios where we were maybe having thousands of environment, but that not be possible to create thousands of subfolder and manage it because every folder needs to be monitored and governed separately. So while you are setting this in cloud for the first time, take that wise decision saying what folders should be created so that at the abstract layer your folders should be. You should not go to at that granular level saying, okay, I'm just creating multiple folders, there are thousands of folders. Even you can create subfolder here, but each subfolder brings you a separate kind of orchestrator itself, right? And it has to be independently managed. So it's always best practice to see, in order to onboard any new automation, what should be the folder structure and at what abstract layer you can go. Like in our case, we have given a best practice. You should go only for 3 layer. You should not go more than 3, because beyond 3, it's difficult to manage as well, right? So you can define in that sequence and come to one of the process structure here. Right. So while you are doing this setup, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. One is how you are defining the role, right? For modern folder, it brings certain great features. One is, let's say, folder administrator. So while you are creating any folder, suppose you created a folder and tenant, you basically, first step is tenant, you've given a tenant administrator, because cloud admin not necessarily be tenant admin, right? Because you will not manage that. Assume a scenario, you have 10 different tenants. You cannot manage 10 different tenant as at all time. So you create this tenant and then give it tenant administrator to respective functional support team. Assume I'm just considering you are part of a central COE. You have various departments. Those scenario. Suppose you create various tenant. You create a tenant administrator. Now create these folders like we just created finance and different folders. But at a primary folder level, give a folder administrator role so that respective person assigned to that particular folder administrator folder, they can now manage by themselves, right? So in order to give this role, by default, this is a default role comes out of box to cloud, which called as allowed to be a folder administrator and folder administrator. And I'll just say for your information, right? So allowed to be folder, this type of name you will see in Automation Hub, sorry, in cloud. The even in Orchestrator also it exists today. The key differentiator is something you see as allowed to be. That means it is a tenant level role. If you see there is no allowed to be, but only folder administrator, that means it's a folder level role. This is how you should read the roles. If you see something with allowed to be, that means it is at a tenant. Like if you're giving some user at a tenant level access, it is at a allowed to be. At a folder level, you will not see that allowed to be, it's only a folder administrator. Assume a scenario, you are onboarding a user as a folder administrator who will further manage the folder in terms of adding a process, adding queues, like assets and different stuff, all is managed there. Then you have to give this two role to him, not only one role, right? You have to give him allowed to be folder administrator at tenant level, then folder administrator at folder level, then he has the full access to do the required activities. Same as automation user as well. Suppose you are onboarding your automation user, make sure you select this allowed to be, which is a tenant level, and folder level as automation user. So we have seen this just now. We saw the demo how to create a folder, how to create a folder and give access. And remember about the packages. I'll tell you one of the development setup best practice, right? In our organization, we have development team working for various departments. That's right. So we have, let's say, same team member from COE will work under finance. They will work under CO, CS. But for execution perspective, these are all different. But from development team, maybe there are some shared licenses are there. So one of the best practice you can look is, okay, instead of creating multiple dev environment, you can create single dev environment. So what will happen with that is you don't need to create multiple license for same user. If you create multiple dev environment, you may be creating multiple license from same developer. So if it is same development environment, how do you segregate? That's the question, right? So you can create folders. So you create development folder, like CS development, CO development from the same tenant, and give access to the developers so they can, with the same license, they can work on multiple folders as well. Okay, so that is one of the tips. So while you're creating this tenants and folders, just put all this together in terms of which environment it is. If it is production, there could be a tight SLA ask, sorry, SOD ask, data security ask. So you have to follow that. Development may have some controls in terms of how we can bring folders and developers together. And one benefit of what I just explained, there are scenarios where you can bring folder level packages that bring a lot of benefit when you are working on a shared infrastructure for development. Suppose you want to have this development packages into folder, don't not at a tenant level, so everybody start exposing it. So you can bring that at a folder level, so it will be beneficial. This is how we can manage modern folders. This helps. I'll suggest if you're on classic folder, if you switch to modern folder, you see a lot benefit as well, because classic folder is legacy in terms of all these environment management, but here it is more groups. You give access to a group, and as soon as the packages are created, you don't need to recreate the package. As soon as the process published, all the users having access, they got the process. The real benefit will also come when you are working on a attended environment, right? You have multiple attended users. So you create a group, give permission to a folder to a group, and all the users part of that particular group will get automations as soon as it get published to attended tenant. So there's some tips and tricks which you can take back and while you are setting up. Okay. Now, the last part for today's session is on automation ops. So this concept launched not recently, but I guess in last year, where it is helping in terms of bringing right governance. So what we were doing before, right? If you think, well, the beginning of automation development, RP development, we used to do code review. So the code reviews are, let's say somebody published code, your new developers come, at the end you need to maintain some coding standard. Very common, let's say naming should be there. I'm just going with very minimal, right? Naming, you should override the names. What should be your, you should not hard coding, empty sequences or empty, no catch block is not properly defined. So all this, a lot of basic, still complex scenarios we used to validate manually. But automation ops is really solving that problem in terms of bringing all these critical coding standards into one central place. Within your orchestrator, we can create these policies, all these rules centrally, and you can import as a policy to all the users connected to orchestrator. As soon as they get connected to orchestrator to get the license, the policy also get applied, right? So the policies are also very known to all COST members. As it just very briefly, I'll touch few. Like, let's say we want to ensure there is a JSON file available. Main workflow is really exist. You want to limit how many arguments can be there as part of a workflow, and catch block is not empty. Layered count is not a hard-coded timeout, empty workflows. So there are possible scenarios, and there are certain areas which is long-running workflow, persistent scenarios, persistent workflows particularly. Default naming on your activities, like you are using like dragging some activity but not change it as per current run. A nested if else clause where you can define here I mentioned 3, but you can define like for our current rule I mentioned 3, but you can also change this from 3 to any other number. And let's say naming convention, how you want to use right line. You don't want people to use right line only log messages. Duplicate name as well. In out your naming convention for arguments and variable both. Suppose you want to prefix your argument for direction wise, you can define that. Length of the variable, how it should be. So some criticals, which is very much known to many team member. Infinite loop scenarios. Secure strings should not be passed between workflows. So even you can provide some packages. These packages should not be installed. Some variables suppose declare but not used, those. So these are all different rules which is comes by default. You can also create your own, and you can define it as like the rule as well. So it's not about what is coming by default. You can create your own and also import that rule. So as soon as the user connected, this will be a reference for him. And one good part is you can disable and enable that, but you can define what label this are imported in. If it is error, I really want to maintain some strong coding standard. If you define all these are error, then users like developers are not able to publish the code as well, right? They're not able to publish until these standards are met. You don't need to inform them, do the changes, it will be very much on the developer studio. They have to follow the standard, and only after all the changes are applied, you can publish the code further, right? Initially, I have seen this will be a little bit hiccups. Okay, we timing impact and all, but eventually once your CI come to speed, you'll see it is you have a very hygiene code in production, right? So they're very all are very useful use cases. You can also create some studio like governance at studio and studio X level. Suppose you have citizen developers, you can create this as a citizen developer layer as well. So you can create all this. So some of additional governance rules are whitelisting some URLs. Suppose you want to whitelist some or block some URL. You don't want to allow some users, let's say production URLs on development environment, right? You can block all this. That's also not possible from remote. Let me show you how you can do the setup, right? So if you go to Orchestrator, and here there is a section above admin automation ops. So it will open with robotic ops. I hope I have it in my test environment. Okay, here it is. Okay, you can enable for the first time you log in. So once you create this governance, just create a policy. Just click on add policy. Give a name. Let's say I'm creating a policy for developers, right? I'll say studio developer policy. And here I can select for which tool I'm giving this. Let's say Studio Pro or maybe Studio. So availability, if they are connected, disconnected, till what stage it should be available, I can give it 1 day. They need to connect. And here is the important part coming. Like these are all different settings you can define, like enforce workflow policy rule during analyze. So some cases, if like your publish has to be analyzed before publish, it has to be checked. So what will happen with this is, as soon as somebody start publishing, it will import the rule for as a mandatory check. Even you can do it during run. Suppose I run it, the analyze will apply. If you disable this, what will happen is team can start developing, but they will do only the best practice application at the end, which is not good, right? They'll say, okay, my UAT is sign off, now I need to do all these code changes. So if you do this check before, during the development and society phase itself, it can be identified. So it is a good practice to enable this, and which language you want to restrict and all, also part of some basic configurations. Now, this is some additional settings. I'll go to the import and is manage. This is another section. For example, you want to restrict some source, like these sources are available to install some package in your organization. Suppose there is a restriction not to download from community portals, then you can disable this too. So it will be only restricted to your orchestrator tenant. So let's say production is going to download from community. If it is open, you can download, you can define. Even you can add your own package, right? You can enable and add only package. Now here is the rule. So all the rule what we discussed is part of workflow analyzer. Here all these rules are part of it. Let's say you want to get into a description, you can always search this in UiPath docs are very clearly called out what rule is for what. So once you identify, okay, this rule needs to be applied, just select that error warning. I was showing you the table, right? Each error code and the code and what is its meaning for. And here, suppose this is the argument specific scenario, and you have an option here as well, saying you want to go to default value or you want to define your own custom value. Let's say default is, let's say 3, right? So let's go at 3 or 5, whatever documented. But you want to set a argument count to 5. So you can save this. So it's override the default value. So once this policies you have defined, you created, you add your own policies as well. You can save this. See, this policy is now created. Now, how do you, this is not the end. You have to apply this policy as well. You remember we created a group. So now what we will do, we will apply this policy to the group. So I will search, let's say developers. Now for studio, I will say this studio policy. Now, as soon as the user get connected to the development group, the moment they accept the license and login, automatically the policy will be imported on their studio, right? So it will available in the studio interface. Let me see if I'm already connected. I'll show you how the policy comes. I'm connected to my enterprise policy. So you can go to help section. I'm not in enterprise. There is a different account I'm connected. So if I'm connected to a policy, it will available here company policy and what is the policy name. Okay. Let's see if I can just show you. Oh, there's a process running in background. Okay, and meantime, I'm open for any questions. If anyone wants to have any questions, that's the end of slide. Feel free to unmute while I log in and show you how the policy appears. Okay. Any questions? So we are in SAML, so it's redirect me through SAML authentication. Next day I will go to I hope I have some policies, not sure, but if it is there, it will reflect on this so that all policy get applied to my dev ID. Look like I have one. Let me just restart my studio. No, I don't have policy defined. There is, you can see this none should not be there. So it automatically appear on the screen. Okay, so that's how you can define all this governance. It is very, very important. It's really working well. I have seen our citizen developer programs helping this automation ops. So you can reduce your code review time once you define this. Okay, I'm open for any question. I know we are on top of our. Any questions or comments? And we have a next session. Our next month session is on automation store and all these APIs, so reusable components. You can also find that and subscribe to it. If there is no other question, I think we can definitely close the call. Yep.
Thank you for the presentation. It was great.
Thank you. Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining in.
Thank you.